behold its size. This is my canvas. It's to be a cold, dark and very gentle place. But first, I must see flame.
Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silvermont, and let's talk Dark Souls. In particular, today we'll be having a look at the first DLC of Dark Souls 3, Ashes of Ariandel. As of time of writing, the second DLC hasn't released yet, but let's get started. Players will travel to the frozen land of Ariandel, where they will uncover the mystery of what destroyed this land. As with near all of Dark Souls, the story of Ariandel is very open to interpretation. The story unfolds the same way for everyone, but each of us will take something different away from it. And that's the reason I make these videos. I will present my take on the story, but please do tell me yours down in the comments. The painted world of Ariandel's story is, from my perspective, an internalized version of the overarching themes that dominate Dark Souls and Dark Souls 3. The cycle. From a colourless grey world came the Age of Fire, but the fire will one day fade, leading us into the Age of Darkness, the Age of Man. But then, from the ashes, a spark reignites, and the cycle begins anew. We can see much of this same story in the painted world, a world painted into existence, a world painted with fire and blood. Instead of encroaching darkness, the painted world suffers from a creeping rot. Some would have this burnt away. Others, they would see the rot spread.
When the world rots, we set it afire for the sake of the next world. It's the one thing we do right, unlike those fools on the outside.
This Quarian has another line wherein he references outsiders. When I heard that, I assumed he meant those quite literally outside of his home, but upon hearing this line, it dawned on me that most like he is referring to the world outside the painting, which suggests that he at least is very much aware that there is a world outside. Certainly, for those who might have entered the painting, they would obviously know, but this suggests that all of the inhabitants might well be aware of the fact that they exist within a painting. But what is the story of Ariandel as presented to us in-game? During their hunt for St. Aldrich, the Ashen One will come across his purported residence, the Cathedral of the Deep, and by the cleansing bonfire the Ashen One will encounter Gale, a worn old fellow prostrating himself before an altar.
Ah, merciful goddess, mother of the forlorn who have no place to call their own, please bear witness to our resolve. Fire for Ariandel. Fire for Ariandel.
Two immediate questions spring from this dialogue. Who are the forlorn, and who might be their merciful goddess? Concerning the forlorn, this is not the first time we've heard of them in Dark Souls. Born of Aldia's obsession with the first sin, the forlorn lost both their corporeal form and a world to call their own. Now they drift into other worlds, ever in search of a home. But without self, one has neither beginning nor end, and so the forlorn have only to wander. Whether or not these are the same forlorn encountered in the second game is up to you to decide. I choose to believe they are one and the same, for their names match up, as does their role in the game. The forlorn have lost their world, and Ariandel is, most certainly, a refuge for the lost.
Rejoice, my new friend, for this is a true haven of the forlorn, the cold and gentle painted world of Ariandel.
But what has caused them to take this form? What has brought them to the painted world? The king's elder brother Aldia sought to overcome the curse through means unlike his siblings. The forlorn were born of Aldia's sinful infatuation. If the Forlorn are a result of a man attempting to overcome the curse, and they have lost both their physical form and the world they called their own, what does that mean to you? To me, it suggests that Audia was attempting to link afflicted undead to something that goes beyond the physical world, be it the bonfires, the soapstones, the arch trees, or some other means of tapping into that power which allows us to traverse into the worlds of other undead, whether as invaders or jolly companions. Now, although the painted world is connected to the outside via bonfires, it is still a very different sort of world, an artificial one, and thus could make a fitting home for the Forlorn. As for their goddess, their merciful goddess, there are a number of characters who might fit this role. Guinevere, Fina, Yorshka, Priscilla, the Painter Girl, Velka. Personally, I believe Velka or Yorshka are the best candidates here. We know there is a church of Yorshka after all, and she has some connection to the painted world, as does Velka. What do you think? And who is Gael? His slave knight armour remarks that it was a symbol of honour used by slave knights, undead warriors serving as fodder in the bleakest of battles. Did he escape this life and find refuge in the painting, where he came to serve the girl who calls him uncle? Interesting to note is the fact that he uses the Executioner's sword, a weapon found near to where we first locate Gael, yet it claims that it belonged to a debauched executioner, which doesn't seem to fit Gael, unless that was him long ago, and now he atones for his past excesses. I do not personally believe he is that same executioner, linked with Horus the Harshed to some extent, but you could certainly make that argument, and it's worth noting. Gael pleads with us to enter the painted world of Ariandel and present flame to his lady, so that she might create a new painting, a new world. But I know what you're thinking. What about the painted world of Ariamis from the first Dark Souls? Could this be the same painting, restored? The clues are there, aye, but once again it is ultimately left up to the player to arrive at their own conclusions. We encounter different locations, different enemies, but we can stumble upon Priscilla's lonely tower, which would seem to suggest that this is a later version of that same painting. So why is it nothing more than a scrap? Surely you recall the grandeur of the original piece, dominating a hall in Anor Londo. That is where the Pontiff Sullivan comes into play. He was born in the painted world, which explains a lot. Irithyll being the ruins of Anor Londo, it might be that Sullivan destroyed the painting for one reason or another, and we now know why Aldrich has dreamed of what is almost certainly Priscilla. I digress, however. So, we learn from Gael that another Ashen One lingers in the painted world, and it isn't too long before we find her. Sister Frida, her true, or should I say full identity being Black Flame Elfrida, one of the founding members of the Sable Church, and older sister to Uria and Lillian of Londor. Yet whilst Lillian remains largely unaccounted for, it may be she makes an appearance during the usurp ending though, and Uria strives for Londor's greatness, something seems to have disenchanted Frida, as Uria suggests that she has given up on Londor, and indeed she seems to have very little interest in Londor once we speak to her in the painting. Instead, she plays a role rather like Priscilla's, at least initially. She greets us pleasantly enough, yet bids us to leave at once. But when has an undead ever listened to what anyone told them? Don't even consider visiting Anor Londo, they said. Become one with the dark, they said. Of course, the Ashen One plunders the painted world as they do all else, and as they delve deeper, they come across Frida's knight and protector, Sir Wilhelm.
I've seen your kind, time and time again. Every fleeing man must be caught. Every secret must be unearthed. Such is the conceit of the self-proclaimed seeker of truth. But in the end, you lack the stomach for the agony that you'll bring upon yourself.
And what was he guarding? Or rather, who was he guarding? Why, the painter girl, with her pale hair, pale skin, and almost elfin appearance. The painter girl reminds me some of the Thumerians from Bloodborne, but yet more so of Yorshka and Priscilla. There is almost certainly a connection here, yet what? She feels the scent of ash on our character and thanks us, proclaiming that we are the one Uncle Gale spoke of, the one to show her flame. Wilhelm was keeping her trapped here, away from her canvas. Why not kill her? Simply, she cannot die. At one point, she remarks that she has not forgotten what her mother told her. But who could be her mother? Priscilla? Yorshka? Velka? Someone else entirely? Could Sullivan be her brother? Well, consider this. Yorshka is young and naive, so I do not think her the mother, and likewise consider that Yorshka knows neither crows nor dragons, which would indicate that she has probably not encountered the Corvians of the Painted World. Nor does she touch upon any close relationship with Sullivan, merely remarking on his crimes. Unlike the painter girl, Yorshka is mortal in that we can kill her. Is that because she is outside the painting? If the painter girl left the painting, would she be mortal? I can only hope that we'll learn a little more about the painter girl in the future. Who knows, maybe her name is Ariamis. Once we have freed her, it is only a short ways further until we encounter the father of the painted world, he who the painting now shares its name with, Ariandel himself. With his appearance ringing so true to Bloodborne, the near Corvian-looking Ariandel speaks with a thick Scottish accent. I wonder if it's the same voice actor who played Benhart. He announces that he can see flame, that he requires more blood, for the world is painted with blood. He requests his flail, which has seemingly been confiscated by Frida to prevent his self-flagellation, which naturally leads to blood for the painting. Frida herself appears to have perhaps deceived Father Ariandel in some way, and it isn't long before Frida makes her grand entrance.
'Tis only the flame quivering at misguided ash. Please avert thine eyes. I will snuff out these ashes for good.
And upon her defeat, the sight of her blood seems to enrage Ariandel, perhaps as he cares for her, or perhaps for some other reason entirely. Remember, when he asks for his flail, he is essentially asking for blood. He needs blood for the painting. Frida is an ashen one, much like us, and Ariandel appears to ember her, leading to her revival. Then the Ashen One fights both Father Ariandel and Frida. Upon their defeat, Ariandel vanishes, granting no soul, and proclaims the following.
When ashes empty, a flame alighted. Thou ash, and fire befits thee of course.
Is this the flame to show the painter girl? Mayhaps. Two sparks together might cause a blaze, after all. Ariandel himself might not truly have died, considering that he speaks following his body's disappearance, and he grants us no soul. He is incidentally holding a large object which very well could be a Lord vessel, which was used in the first game to travel between bonfires, to teleport. Did he warp out upon his defeat? I doubt we'll be seeing more of him, but rarely do bosses speak to us following their defeat in the Souls games. Why, so far as I can recall, the only other example would, of course, be the Scholar of the First Sin, Aldia. We can obtain Ariandel's flail, but it comes from Frida's soul, which makes sense considering that she was the one who held the flail, keeping it away from Ariandel. And as for Frida, she revives once again, this time revealing her true nature, Black Flame Frida. What is Black Flame? Well, we've heard the term before. Black flames born from the abyss bear no shadow. They are said to be the impenetrable fires of humanity. And also, pyromancy discovered from the dark of the abyss by a pyromancer who wandered Ulasil. Considering that Dark Souls 3 shed new light concerning the Xanthus scholars and Ulasil, that is rather interesting. Remember, after all, we encountered Xanthus King Jeremiah in the original painted world of Ariamis, so what is a black flame? It appears to be a flame born of the abyss, an almost contradictory term if you consider that the abyss is so closely linked to humanity and the Age of Darkness. But then again, the Dark Soul is not so different from the Lord's Souls, so why shouldn't it have its own flame? The Onyx Blade tells us that the black flame smoulders within Frida. Just how that came to be is a very good question, but not a perplexing one, as Frida comes from Londor, the land of hollows. Once she has been put down for a third and final time, the Ashen One claims her soul, which seems to indicate that perhaps she didn't deceive Ariandel. After all, Frida was the first Ash to enter the painting, but together with the Good Father, they chose rot over fire. Together with Ariandel, they chose rot over fire. There is still the possibility of deception here, that she tricked him into believing this was the best course of events. But why? Why better to prolong a rotting existence? Or burn it away? After renouncing everything new, Frida discovered a people that she wished to protect and assumed the precise form that they yearned for. Why did she wish to protect them? Especially if this was after she renounced everything. The plight of Londor is to deny the linking of fire and let the world fall into darkness, very similar to denying the restoration and burning of the painted world. So even if she has renounced Londor, her ideology doesn't seem to have changed. The form that she assumed, the form the Corvians yearned for, can that be anything other than the bastard crossbreed, Priscilla? Why, at the back of the room where we fight Ariandel and Frida, one might find an effigy of what could well be Priscilla. I do not think Frida's intentions are wholly evil, truth be told. The item flat out tells us she wished to protect them, even if perhaps that was not the best course of action. But then, what do you think?
I wonder if Uncle Gale has found it. The dark soul of man,